Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Biosupply Management Alliance, fondly called BSMA, a global community of supply chain professionals in the life sciences industry. I am Devendra Mishra, the Executive Director of BSMA and the co-founder of the Alliance as well. Today is a very special day for us because extraordinary executives of our industry have come together to help us deal with what I deem as being onerous, complex, difficult challenges of international trade. And they are here to answer your questions, and it should be quite an exchange of questions and answers. It is indeed a great privilege of mine to introduce the moderator for the event, who happens to be Deep Sengupta.
Morning.
I recall after getting the law degree from the University of Washington, he stepped into KPMG. He drove the international trade compliance work at FedEx. And then he had this bold idea of launching an academy that he called the DSG Global Academy. And thank God he did, because for the last more than 12 years, he's been serving the industry diligently with international trade compliance assistance, with tariff issues, with all the related matters that go with it that you know much better than I do. Before I turn it over to him, I just want to mention that we welcome your questions. If we do not get all your questions answered, trust me, we are capturing your questions in the Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen. Not the chat box, but the Q&A bar, or Q&A icon. And we will respond to your questions if we don't get them addressed today down the road. The entire recording is going to be made available to you, probably within a week of this event. So with that, what a pleasure it is to turn it over to the moderator, Deep Sengupta, the founder, the CEO of DSG Global. Deep, please take it away.
Thank you, Devendra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to friends from all over the world. Welcome to BSMA's webinar on what services should you expect from your customs broker. Friends, the genesis of this idea came from our in-person seminar earlier this year in Foster City, where a representative from US Customs, when asked, how do we stay in compliance with the ever-changing trade laws and tariff rules, said, rely on your broker. Work with your customs broker as your partner. So friends, we've got the three brightest minds in the industry today in customs brokerage to advise us, guide us, and teach us about the A to Z of customs brokerage from a very high level in only 60 minutes. So with that disclaimer, I'd love to introduce my amazing panelists. We have Pete Mento, who leads DSV's compliance and consulting practice. Hello, Pete. We have Lila Landis, who until recently was with Seco Logistics and has now launched her own Landis consulting firm. Lila, we're so thrilled to have you. And I must say, Pete's on the East Coast, Lila's in Texas, and finally, Angela Aaron, who is based in Michigan with Clear Now, which is an amazing new generation customs broker, which we'd love to hear more about. Friends, the sequence of today is for the next few minutes, I'm going to request Pete, Lila, and Angela to talk a little bit about their role in the custom brokerage industry and about their employers. Let me first introduce Pete. In his current role, Pete is the Director, Customs and Trade Services at DSV, and he leads the efforts to grow the consulting practice of DSV. Not an easy task with the recent global merger with Schenker, Pete. I know you're super busy, and I appreciate your time as you just got off a plane from England. In the past, Pete has served as the practice leader and partner for tax firms like Ryan, KPMG, and Crow. He has also run the global customs operations for consulting firms and freight forwarding firms like Expeditors, C.H. Robinson, and Crane Worldwide. Pete is a customs house broker who received his master's degree in government trade theory from Harvard University and did his undergraduate work at the Maine Maritime Academy, where he served 5 consecutive years as the member of the advisory board. His doctoral studies at the University of Durham in the UK is focused on trade law, on how trade, economics, and geopolitics politics interconnect. Pete is a noted trade academic and is also, as many of you know, a highly sought after speaker throughout the world. Throughout his career, he's given over 2,000 public lectures and over 500 full day seminars. A former professional stand up comic, Pete also has a podcast on global trade called Trade Geek, which has over 10,000 subscribers. Pete, thank you. And I'd love for you to tell us, well, a little more about your current role insofar as it pertains to customs brokerage.
Absolutely. So I'm Pete Mento. As was mentioned, I'm the Director of Customs and Trade Services here at DSV. My job is to both grow the product, grow the sales of the customs product, while at the same time being a resource, and my team being a resource for our clients on issues of trade. As you can imagine, in the current environment, I think all of us can say we're very busy right now. So thank you for the opportunity today, and I look very forward to collaborating with my colleagues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete. We now have Lila. Lila, I see the little mute button. Uh, so Lila is the principal of Landis Compliance Consulting Firm. She's a licensed custom broker as well, a certified U.S. export compliance officer, a certified global sanctions specialist, and a certified compliance and ethics professional who's been in the global compliance and logistics field for over 15 years. Lila has built and managed compliance programs as well as international teams and has been in leadership roles in large organizations such as Seiko, as I mentioned, where she was the chief compliance officer. Lila supports leaders of trade compliance networking groups such as the ICPA across the US and is the founder of the Dallas chapter of ICPA called their data groups called the Defined Area Territory Groups. Lila is a board member of the NASBIT, the National Association of Small Business International Trade Education, a member of CBP's Trade Support Network, and advisor to the University of Houston's Women in Leadership program. Fluent in French and Spanish, Lila studied abroad in grad school and earned her global MBA from the University of Houston, Victoria in Texas. Welcome, Lila. And if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your role insofar as custom brokerage in the past.
Yes, thank you, Deep, very much for that introduction. So I have worked in international trade and logistics for over 17 years, and the majority of my career was spent working for importer exporters. And so I have worked on the importer side, being the importer managing entries and working directly with the customs broker, managing that broker. And then I've also spent a little bit of my career on the broker side. In my most recent role at Seiko, who's a global customs broker, and managing compliance for customs broker and helping clients to manage their compliance as well. So I'm really excited to share perspectives from both sides of the table today.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lila. And last but not the least, Angela Aaron. Angela is the Senior Director of Compliance at ClearNow AI. Angela heads the global trade and custom brokerage services at ClearNow, which is an AI ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning powered customs platform. Angela, you've got to tell us more in just a minute about that. Prior to joining ClearNow, she provided consulting firm services as a member of KPMG's Trade and Customs practice, and she previously served as the program's director for Women in International Trade in Northern California. Angela holds a bachelor's degree in management and a minor in economics from Kettering University, formerly GMI, and she is a custom broker as well and a notary public commissioned in the state of Michigan, and was named recently the Women of the Year, the Woman of the Year by Supply and Demand Chain Executive. Welcome, Angela. And please tell us more about this AI ML that is taking custom brokerage to this century.
Yes, thank you, Deep, and good morning, everyone. I've been in customs brokerage for approximately 25 years now, with experience that Deep shared with you all. Thank you, Deep. And with ClearNow, we started the company in 2018 with a vision to help both customs brokers and importers to modernize the experience and bring down the black box in terms of sending, faxes and phone calls of what's the status on things to help people self-serve. There was also some inspiration in terms of the rideshare companies with like Uber and Lyft, in terms of you have a rider on one side and a driver on the other, with the app helping to service in the middle with the administration. And so that's where we started ClearNow, with the riders being importers and the drivers being customs brokers, and built a marketplace for them to come together and meet each other to provide global trade data analytics. And we also use advanced technologies such as AI and ML to digitize documents, all of your trade documents, contextualize the data on those documents so they're available for advanced reporting and analytics, forecasting, and the like. So it's been a great experience, and I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Fabulous. Friends, the format of today is rather than have each of our really knowledgeable speakers speak on custom brokerage, we thought we'd come up with 10 questions that really span the whole breadth of what you as a company need to know about custom broker, how to work with your custom broker, how to measure, manage, what to expect. So these 10 questions I'm going to ask the panel, and we'll keep our discussions to under 3 minutes each, so we can wrap up this and then still have time for Q&A. So the first question is, Pete, if I may pose this to you, what does a customs broker do? As in, we've heard the term customs business, and what value-added services over and above the usual can a customs broker provide?
Absolutely. So the standard answer would be that a customs house broker helps a importer manage the data and paper trail and process and the flow of information to the government in order to clear the goods. But that could not be farther from the case as modern customs house brokers. You have 3 of them on the call today, and I'll tell you, we're becoming very rare. There are not a lot of brokers left. There are less than 10,000 in the whole country, and about half of them are over the age of 50, about 10% are over the age of 80. It's an arduous journey to become a broker, and once you have that license, you're able to work on behalf of importers to shepherd that information to the government. But that's the lame side of it. In reality, what brokers generally do is act as advocates and advisors to their clients. So as advocates, we work on behalf of our clients with the number of government agencies that importers have to deal with every day, beyond just Customs and Border Protection. Whether it's FDA, Fish and Wildlife, you name it, we're going to be engaged with them to help, as I said, advocate on their behalf. Secondly, we act as advisors. The advocacy side of things is fun, but the advisor side of things is really where we make our bones, we make our money here. Particularly in the current environment where tariffs are so complicated and it's difficult to understand where things are going to go next, a customs house broker is there for you to help try to demystify what's going on with the shipments, what's going on with tariffs, and to speak with you in plain terms about what you can expect with regards to the business. On the second half of that, my father was an importer. My dad was a spice importer. I started, dealing with all that when I was very young. And in the 1980s, 1970s, customs house brokers were not really beholden to the idea of the Modernization Act. where we were not fully responsible or at all responsible today for the advice that we give. It's the importer's responsibility to do the right thing. In the old days, that wasn't the case. In the old days, they worked very closely with importers to help them to understand their responsibilities, to help guide and consult them on what to do next. And what we're seeing in the modern world is customs house brokers taking more of that responsibility back. So we have some incredible professionals here with us today that really do represent both sides of that. A consultative customs house broker who works on behalf of their clients to give them the best advice and help them take advantage of regulations, and then also defend them when there are issues that go on with customs. And then we have someone, well, two people that are working more commonly with importers to bring goods in. As the world has changed, as technology has changed, the role of the broker has changed along with it. I think we're far from done. I think that with the advent of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, you're going to see us continue to evolve to be more than just a commodity-based product that's, you pick the lowest cost bidder, as people that are actually there to consult and advocate for their clients.
Wonderful. I really appreciate the comprehensive answer. Lila or Angela, would you like to add something?
I would just like to echo what Pete was saying at the end there, kind of the change that's happening with the role of the broker. And I think, you had mentioned, Deep, that this webinar really came out of a discussion with US Customs where they said you should rely on your broker to help guide you from a compliance standpoint. And I think that the way that Customs sees the role of the broker is part of that change, where Customs is really looking to brokers more heavily than ever before to be responsible for compliance and to be an extension of Customs in helping importers to be compliant and to follow the regulations. And so I think that there's much greater emphasis on the role of the broker in less of a transactional sense and more of a strategic sense than there ever has been before.
Great, thank you. Lila, I'll pose the next question to you. Do you really need a customs broker, or can you just do the work yourself? And when do you recommend company get a customs broker? And
Yeah, so importers can certainly file entries themselves, right? And the basic transactional part of filing customs entries with customs is something that's available to you, but it's not really something that I recommend importers take on unless they're extremely sophisticated and they have a large amount of resources that are already very knowledgeable in imports and in brokerage, right? And so this is something where, maybe your largest companies, your multi-billion dollar companies who have very large trade teams at their disposal might consider doing self-filing. But the vast majority of importers are really best served by leaving the filing to the experts, to customs brokers who have already done all of the work of having the systems available, maintaining those systems, having relationships with customs, having relationships with the ports, with the centers of excellence and expertise, with the partner government agencies, and really having them to be a guide, right? Because it's more than just the transactional nature of filing an entry. The customs broker is also there to help guide you through the whole process, to be able to explain changes to the regulations and how they're going to impact your business. And you're not going to get as much of that if you're trying to do it all yourself. So I typically do not recommend self-filing. I think that it's not the right option for 99+% of importers. And so that's how I view it. In terms of when to engage a broker versus a forwarder versus consultant versus attorney, I think it depends on the nature of what the issue is that you're working with. Customs brokers do provide some guidance in consulting services, but it depends on the individual broker as far as how much they'll do. And there's a line that you kind of cross between what's a given part of just brokerage services, maybe like, hey, help me with this one classification, versus, hey, I want you to redo my entire classification database, and that's crossing over into consulting. I think the other thing to consider is, if it's something where you're just dealing with an inquiry from US Customs about one of your entries, and maybe you want to work with just the broker or work with a consultant, versus if you're talking about a full-blown focused assessment or penalties or things like that, I think that's where that crosses into, you should probably be engaging a trade lawyer who's going to be able to help you with the legal aspects of how you work through that with customs and partner government agencies. So that's my perspective on the different roles that those providers can play.
Perfect. Peter, Angela, any additional comments? If not, we'll go to the sorry, I didn't mean to cut
Oh,
anyone.
I was just gonna say, I echo the sentiments that Lila shared, and being an ABI provider, I've worked with self-filers, I've worked with companies who have explored it, decided not to do it. I've seen companies try it and have epic failures. So I'm not saying don't explore it, but my emphasis is on, if you're thinking about it, really do your diligence, try to talk to as many people as you can and understand what's really involved there, because really has to be your life when you're filing customs entries. It's not just the transaction, it is everything that goes with it.
Thank you. Well, question number 3 is on trade compliance. Seriously, I say every time you meet your customs broker, please tell them, give them some grace, and you don't have to give them a hug, but give them a virtual hug. And because the last few months have been a crazy roller coaster. As you can tell, messages come out from the White House, and then you have the customs messages, CSMSs, and then the broker has to figure it all out. So, but how much should you rely on your broker to keep you informed about the recent import-export laws? Angela, I see you, for instance, I know you're updating your customers, clear now. What is the customs broker's role to educate its audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, Deep. And it goes back to with customs brokerage, and like Pete had said, you really are an advocate for your importers, and you're helping set them up for success and to optimize their import experience. And so, everyone's seeing things in the media, the word tariff, I mean, that was, my world and Pete's and Lila's, but it wasn't dinner conversation a year ago. And now, we're having to parse through that ourselves too. If we see, a headline on our phones, we're translating that through official sources. Like, we understand where to go and confirm what's real, what the actual dates are, what the impacts are to the trade, then to be able to translate that into regular English that people can understand. Does this impact me? How does it impact me? When does it impact me? And how do I navigate through this? What do I not know that I should know? Is my cost going to be 50% next week or 145? Oh, it's 10 now. Your broker can help walk you through that. So your broker is very knowledgeable. They're watching things in real time. They're understanding the industry, but what they don't necessarily know is your business. And they can never know your products as well as you do. And so it becomes very collaborative in terms of the broker, is very informed, and they can guide you and they can give you advice and suggestions. But they also need input from you as to what your products are, or whether you can qualify, for a certain program or optimize something. So you may get a lot of questions from your broker trying to understand and make sure they're maximizing the accuracy and the duty calculations. And that's really just them trying to do their job and make sure that they understand and they're interpreting it properly for the entry filing. So they can provide a lot of value, but they can't be the one-stop shop. They do need some input from you and making sure that you're aligned, you understand, what they're doing on your behalf, because customs does expect you're supervising them. So how do you supervise an expert when you're not an expert yourself is, part of what we're discussing here today. But it's very important, to seek that balance in terms of, working with the partner that you trust and can help you stay on the right track.
Perfect. Peter, I know you've been really educating the trade community through all these tariff changes. Do you have anything to add on the role of the broker as an educator?
Absolutely. I think you'll find that brokers are excited to talk about this stuff. Our partners and our children don't want to hear it, sometimes not even our coworkers. So to have an opportunity to discuss this with someone, it usually gets us jazzed up. You need to reach out to your brokers for guidance. That's why you're paying those fees. And I think you'll find a very enthusiastic partner in that conversation when you contact your broker. If your broker says to you, I don't know, or I don't have guidance for you on that, most of them will say, but I do know someone who can help you. I know that we mentioned people being involved in ICPA. It's an incredible organization of trade compliance professionals, and we're very good at sharing information. Unlike a lot of the rest of the industry, whether we can't or we choose not to, brokers tend to be very open-minded and have open hearts about helping one another. So reach out to your broker when you have a question. I think you'll find they'll be happy to help you along.
Thank you. Well, the fourth question is, this is from my experience. After when I came to the United States, I joined FedEx, and we created a consulting practice. But we saw a lot of small to medium-sized companies placing what I used to call over-reliance, or some people say outsourcing the whole import operation to their customs broker. Record keeping, oh, our freight forwarder knows that or does that. Post entry review, So my question, Lila, if I may, is when is outsourcing too much to your customs broker a bad thing? And what's the balance between your role and responsibilities as an importer versus your service provider?
Yeah, I think, we mentioned earlier the MOD Act. I believe Pete mentioned the MOD Act. And so this is a law that was enacted in, I believe, 93 or 94. And this changed the responsibility of who has the ultimate responsibility for compliance with import laws. And it shifted a lot from the broker to the importer. And so then what I like to tell importers is you can outsource the task, you cannot outsource the risk. The importer is still ultimately liable to US Customs and to partner government agencies like FDA for compliance with the laws that are governing the products that you're bringing into the US. And so then if you have no knowledge of that information at all, if you're relying completely 100% on external providers to do everything for you, then you are putting yourself at risk, because how are you going to effectively manage them if you don't have at least a basic understanding of what they're doing and what they should be doing? So that's what I would say is really thinking about, do I have at least enough knowledge to be able to properly manage these service providers who are doing work for me, to understand that I'm getting the services that I need, that my entry documents look proper, right? You have to be able to do some of your own auditing. You have to be able to do some of your own checks. You should be able to competently answer questions back to your customs broker when they're asking you about things like country of origin, or things about how the product's being imported. And record keeping, like you mentioned, this is one of the basic mistakes I see a lot of small importers want to make, where they think that, well, the broker is going to have all of my import records, and so I don't need to worry about having my own. But that's not true. A complete import packet, as far as what customs expects the importer to have, is more comprehensive than the documents that the broker ever receives from you. And so the broker does not ever receive all of the documents that customs would want to see. These are things like, if you have a contract, with your supplier, the purchase order that you send to the supplier, the payment that you send to the supplier. Those are things the broker likely never sees, but you need to have those for a complete import packet. And so I think it's very important to make sure that you have the basics down in terms of record keeping and knowledge of what the basic requirements are, to be able to manage your broker and to be able to mitigate your risk.
Thank you. Peter, Angela, anything to add?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great line. You can outsource the task, but not the responsibility. Any company it's an importer of any size should have someone who is given the authority to make change. They should have someone on site who is knowledgeable, that they can actually advise internally. They should have someone on site that is budgeted to do the job. And they should have a track record of change. There's nothing more frustrating than visiting an importer who's just assumed that this nameless, faceless person in an office park somewhere cutting entries has been managing this for them all along. They've been doing the part of it that's a paper chase. You still have a responsibility to do the right thing, and you should be reaching out whenever possible to learn more. This is one of probably 100-hour-long trainings you could probably find just this week on these issues. So seeking out that guidance and learning, and for some of you, even taking the test and becoming a broker, it's an excellent way for you to learn more about what we do, become more compliant.
Wonderful. Now, Angela, I know you deal a lot with obviously electronic records. Um, is your customs broker legally required to provide the importer with a copy of the entry files if you request them?
So yeah, this can get a little tricky and it can get into like contractual obligations. So I would say, look at what you signed with your customs broker, as the ultimate authority on this one. But both the customs broker and the importer have federal regulations that require them to keep records for a certain period of time. And generally speaking, that's 5 years, but it can be longer. Or you could be asked to sign a statute of limitations waiver if you're in certain audit situations with customs. And so it's always important for the importer to know where their records are, who has access, how to access, and not risk assumptions. So your customs broker has those records. They're required to keep those records for their own compliance, but they're not necessarily obligated to give you everything you ask for and on the timeline that you prefer. And so that's something to ask if you're going through an RFP. And I know we'll talk about that in a bit, but when you're arranging a relationship with a customs broker, record keeping is an important thing to be aware of. And if you do want their support with managing your records, what does that look like? What is their standard offering? Are there fees or additional services that you may need to consider down the road, so that you're aligned and there's not assumptions about what they can provide and what you're obligated to provide to customs?
Great. Now,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, you mentioned, getting asked to sign a statute of limitations waiver. That is a perfect example of where you should have an attorney. This is where you need a trade attorney. So do not stop it, go straight past and go to a trade attorney if you ever get asked to sign a statute of limitations waiver, because you are in a bad situation.
now, thank you. I just got a question come up in the chat, which we're going to wait till the last few minutes, but the question was such that I thought I must bring it in. Jayant asked, will we be discussing export-related work processes? So friends, on the export side, how can, there's imports, there's returns, exports. How does a customs broker help you on the export side? Could you share some guidance and your experience?
May I jump in? I'm sure that Lila has some things she wants to say, but import brokers, customs house brokers are not generally well-educated, well-heeled in matters of export compliance. They're familiar with them, but this is a very specialized field. And export compliance, unlike import compliance, there's very little room for interpretation. It's right or it's wrong. And when you do it incorrectly, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. You should be seeking out other individuals to work with you that have that background on export compliance. There's parts of it, of course, classification, certainly they could help with. But we're talking about licensing and license exceptions, sanctions. These are things that a broker doesn't normally come across every day. That's going to be something you're going to want to talk to someone who has a very solid background in. And the last point I'll make is you have a lot of folks that are great at import compliance because it usually means you're going to save the company money. That's why they get involved in it. Duty recovery, minimization. Export compliance is the ultimate terrifying gotcha. People tend to learn it because they work for companies that are engaged in it. And it's just not quite as rewarding financially for the company up front. It sure is on the back end when you've done everything correctly and you find yourself in some sort of an enforcement action. And I know you've got plenty to say, Liz, so I'll put myself on mute.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for customs brokers, even when they're part of a larger logistics company that offers export services as well, like DSV, then it still tends to be different departments that handle imports versus exports. Like there's dedicated customs brokerage area of the business where people are just focused on imports and brokerage because it's its own specialty. It's, the regulations are ginormous. And so then it's very easy to just specialize in that versus exports, equally complicated in my view, right? Lots of different agencies involved and very complex, but people don't tend to be an expert in both depending on what they do, right? You might find trade attorneys who work both sides. You would have consultants who work both sides. I myself do both import and export. And you will have, other types of consultants who do, or in-house trade compliance personnel who handle both. But your customs broker is not really the right source to go to for export compliance expertise, but they can refer you to competent resources. Oftentimes there are recommendations that they can make.
Great, thank you. There's a wonderful question from the Q&A, and I should put blinkers on and do our 10 questions on the panel discussion, but we've got some wonderful, relevant questions. And one comes from Joel. Joel says, help us understand the import requirements for life sciences across the world. Europe, Asia, South America. How can our custom brokers educate us on the worldwide piece? So I know we talked about import rules and we've talked about how brokers can help on US export rules, but what about the destination country formalities? Is that something for Lila and Pete that your brokerage, such as DSV, can help with, Pete? For instance, suppose I've got
Well, so a U.S. Customs House broker would reach out to their colleagues, or they would reach out to their connections, because the last thing we want to do is make an assumption that import regulations in one jurisdiction are the same as another one, or the way, even if the law is exactly the same, how it's interpreted in that jurisdiction. There are people, maybe even amongst us, who have incredible knowledge of other jurisdictions, and that's great. And they can become a resource for you. But I think it's important to ask your broker if they're comfortable and confident talking about that other jurisdiction. And if not, to see if they can get you someone who is. I'm sure between the three of us, we could probably find someone in every country in the world that would be able to give you advice. And that's a smarter way to go. It is very different everywhere in the world.
Wonderful.
Someone might disagree with me, so feel free.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Somebody who was on the BSMA leadership, Devendra, once famously said, shipping to Indiana is not the same as shipping to India is not the same as shipping to Indiana. And it's a whole another set of rules in most countries. Talking about the trade war, we've said how customs brokers are our advocate, our friend, our guide who can help educate us on these tariffs. But how else has the industry changed over the brokerage over the last few months? I know many brokers are now saying, we cannot pay the duty on your behalf. Please set up a ACH account directly with the government, because we just don't have the financial wherewithal to be a bank for you for 30 days at such high tariffs. Angela, do you see any, especially over the last few months of the trade war, any changes on how brokers are dealing with the customers?
You're spot on, Deep, in terms of the duties, and the amount of the tariffs that importers are paying have increased exponentially. And at least in my experience, and I'm sure, Pete's seeing it as well, importers that had a duty-free imports for the longest time, maybe they were importing from countries that have free trade agreements and they weren't even getting the qualification. They weren't even declaring those benefits because it wasn't a material cost to their business. And now with all the tariff actions, it's becoming more material. It's becoming a strategic, factor to review in terms of, how do I optimize my duty cost? And there's a lot of enforcement by customs right now. So importers that are trying different strategies or making changes maybe to the harmonized tariff code they declare, that can be a flag on the CBP side to say, oh, they made a change. Let's look and make sure they understood what they were doing and they can defend that change. And so importers are seeing very high costs of duties. They're seeing their customs bond. Importers typically have an annual customs bond. Sometimes they'll have a single bond. But those underwriting requirements for those bonds are increasing. The sufficiency of the bonds are, becoming into compromise, because, you're looking at an estimate of what your annual duties are, but you can't forecast these tariff actions. So, it might be May or June, and you've already hit your annual limit on your bond. You have to increase your bond amount underwriting. And you're also seeing customs brokers who are coming back and saying, we used to pay duties for you and invoice you for them, but the risk is too high. And, the cost of capital is high. And so, I know my company, I'm sure others as well, they're helping companies get set up to pay their duties directly. Looking at other strategies in terms of being able to calculate the duties on the water and, try and get the cash in a reserve, in time to be able to manage it, especially for non-resident importers that might not have a US bank account. It gets a bit more complicated. There are solutions, there are strategies, they're continuing to evolve and develop, but that's definitely an area to stay close with your customs broker and understand, what the impact is going to be to your business and that, you can continue importing without the hiccups.
Great, thank you. Well, how do you know your broker is doing a good job, and when is it time to change your customs broker? Lila, do you at some point tell your customer, move on to find a different customs broker? So, can you share a little more best practices and
Yeah, absolutely. So, from my time being on the importer side, I've been through customs brokerage RFPs. I've done consolidation of customs brokers and choosing new providers. And I think it's really looking for, is it still the right fit for where your organization's at right now, you as the importer, and where the broker's at right now, what they're able to provide. So I think some of the signs that it might be time to change is, if your company has really expanded into new markets. So the question that we had about being able to import into all of these various different countries, if you're using a very small broker that doesn't really have resources for, that are outside of just US imports, then that might be something where you want to look at maybe a medium to large size broker that has more global resources to bring to bear to help you with your business. And if you are reaching out to them and you're asking about what's going on with this regulation or that, and you're just continually being brushed off that, oh, I don't have information on that right now, or just here's a link, you go read about it, right? Then they're probably just not prioritizing your business as a client, and that happens, right? And so then those are good signs that it might be time for you to change brokers. I would also just say, if you have more than 2 or 3 customs brokers, I would also be looking at consolidating that. I usually recommend that importers have no more than 2 to 3 customs brokers at a time, and because you want to be able to manage them, you want them to have a good enough piece of your volume that they do consider you to be a priority client. And it's just not effective for you from a management and compliance standpoint to do a shotgun approach where you're using lots of different customs brokers. So those are some of the examples that I'd point out as where you would want to make a change.
thanks, Pete or Angela? Any?
Oh yeah, yeah. No importer is the same as another importer, and the requirements and the needs of that importer are not the same either. It's a real indictment of our industry that when I say to an importer, why do you like the broker you have now? They normally say, well, we like the price. They're nice to us. They don't make a lot of errors. That's sad, right? You want to have a relationship with your broker. So if you don't feel like you have a great relationship with your customs house broker, then you should find someone who's going to treat you how you should be treated. And it doesn't matter if it's a big company, a smaller company, a medium-sized company. Seek out the personality that you want to work with. Seek out someone that you feel is going to do what you need them to do for you. And there's a lot of brokers out there. Do your research, find the ones that you work the best with. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect unicorn customs house broker. I think it's finding the broker that's right for the importer. So do your due diligence and try to find someone that really is going to represent what you need. And one more thing I'll say that went along with that was just said. Your broker needs to be someone you can depend on. And if you're not getting someone that you can depend on, it's time to look for someone else. And there's nothing wrong with letting your broker know you're not happy. Let them know. Have that conversation and give them a chance. And if they don't, it's time to break up and find the next one.
Thank you. Let's just talk a little more about actually how does one go about selecting a broker and the RFP process? A request for proposal. What questions do you ask? Pete, would you mind sharing your feedback on how to issue RFP to a broker. We will be, Lila's been very kind, and Devendra, we will be sending all the registrants some sample RFPs. But Pete, could you share? I know you've been a industry leader in the whole RFP process and broker management, so I'd appreciate your guidance.
The more information you can give the candidates, the better a response you're going to get. I mean far beyond just what's my entry count and my line count. Where's the product coming from? Is it subject to anti-dumping, countervailing, 301, and additional tariffs? Overwhelm us with information about you as an importer. When you do that, we're going to be in a better position to give you an opinion about, can we do this business? Can we do it based on what your expectations are? We're also going to be able to give you the price that you want. There's not going to be a lot of back and forth and questions. Make it very simple for the people that are bidding on your product, on your opportunity, to know precisely what it is you expect and what they're getting into. Overwhelm us with information.
Thank you. Lila or Angela, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say one of my thoughts on a best practice to do when you're doing an RFP is to provide an ACE entry summary report. And so that's what I like to do when on the importer side, when I've issued RFPs is, so it's, I think the current version is like ESM 7008. But the ACE system, for anybody who doesn't know, this is the single window system for customs, and where you as an importer can view your import data. And so you can pull reports of your import data from that. There's a report called an entry summary report, and it shows all of your entries for the date range that you put in. I like to do it for a year, like one calendar year of this is going to show, dates. It's going to show country of export, country of origin, the tariff classification, the duties, all sorts of good information that a broker needs to be able to understand your import profile. So that is one of the ways that you can provide really good data to your brokers. There's some fields on there that you might want to sanitize or remove before you send it to the broker. Like there's a broker filer field, broker filer code field, where it shows like who was the broker that filed it. You might want to remove that, right? If you don't want to reveal all the different brokers that you work with. But generally, that's got really good info that a broker would find really helpful to understanding what your needs are and then being able to respond intelligently to your RFP.
That's great. Friends, we've got two more questions on the panel, but I thought this is a good time to remind all our attendees that if you have any questions, please go to the Q&A feature and put down your questions, and we'll get to it in about 5 minutes. Pete, I want to talk about the value. You mentioned that many customers are just price shopping, which should not be the approach. You should just, obviously have many other facets that you want to ask your customs broker. But talking about the fees, has the traditional brokerage fee payment changed? Do brokers still charge us just per entry, or are there fees for additional services? Is it software as a service model, recurring subscription? Can you tell us more about the payments currently in force?
Absolutely. It's a mixed bag. So there will be importers who will demand a flat fee with no additional charges. And we can get there the more information you give us. There are ones where it will be a transactional fee and then additional fees based on other services, line items, certain other value-added fees that go along with it. These are all negotiable, every single one of them. Also, imports on the border, the southern border and the northern border, tend to be less expensive because of the interaction and the digitization of what's going on there. You tend to see lower fees that are happening there. But they can range, I've seen customs entries at $5 a piece. I've seen them at over 200. It depends on what the complexity is of what you're importing and what's being asked of the broker. The more honest you are with them, the more precise they can be with their price. But all of these things are negotiable, and you should drive a hard bargain with your broker. But remember that the better a broker, the better the experience, the more compliant you want to be, it's probably going to be a little more expensive. You get what you pay for. You wouldn't pick an attorney based on price, I hope. I hope you pick one that was going to be someone who's going to be there to actually work hard for you and advocate for you.
Very good point. Lila, Angela, any thing to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I would echo that you get what you pay for. One of the things that you want to remember is that if you're comparing the lowest cost broker that you found to maybe a more premium service, you have to consider then what does that premium service bring you? And a lot of times the brokers that may have a higher fee, it's because they've made huge investments in technology and in ways of doing work more efficiently. Right? You don't want a broker who is still, in the dark ages working on really outdated systems, who has very limited reporting capabilities, who has, very bare bones staff, where they're overloading people. You want a broker who has kept up with modern technology and is employing those technology tools to better service your account. But that means that it's not going to be bottom of the barrel cost.
Um, Thank you. You talked about state-of-the-art technology, so I have to bring in Angela. Angela, any given I'm a little familiar with Clear now, and amazing how they brought in AI and ML, which is kind of a Silicon Valley software model. How would you answer this pricing question? Does your industry and your company and your peers have they all changed the model for?
Well, it's the spectrum, like Pete said. And so there is an audience that is seeking like a one flat rate. And, my company being founded in Silicon Valley, our headquarters is still there. We put a lot of attention on that, but it's also that the pricing be, appropriate to the importer, to the nature of the entry. At least on our platform, our customs broker network, they set their own prices, and it's based on all the factors we've been discussing. And I think another variable to think about too, especially with this industry, that the group on this call, you may have heavily regulated products. You might have things that are subject to FDA exam, for example, or agricultural inspection. And so, a low-cost broker might not be able to help facilitate that process with customs, with the exam site to get your goods cleared. And then if you have things that might have a short shelf life, or they might have to be cold chain moved, you really need a broker that's going to accelerate getting that clearance, getting that resolved, having the relationships. And there can be some costs associated with that. If you've got things that are really straightforward and clear on a dime, then price can be a bigger factor for you. But if you've got complex entries that are highly regulated, however you price that model, you need a broker that's going to deliver for you.
Great. Now, you mentioned a great point, because we are, as BSMA members, mostly life sciences, in a regulated industry for imports, as you said, FDA, Fish and Wildlife. Do you see brokers focused on life sciences, or do you see larger brokers having a specialty group that deals with participating government agencies? Pete, I know since you work for the largest company among us, could you share your insights into whether there's industry sector or life sciences specialization in the customs brokerage industry?
Not only in the brokerage industry do you have large forwarders that focus on this particular area, you have brokers that do nothing but pharma and healthcare, small boutique brokers. And it harkens back to the conversation we were having earlier, where the three of us said, you've got to find the right broker for your product mix and for you. And I think that that's where really meeting with a broker and building that relationship and meeting them can help you. A company might say, sure, we can handle your product, no problem. But they don't understand the complexities of exactly what it is that you're moving, and the partner government agencies will have to be dealing with. Put them through the paces, test them, ask them the hard questions, and see if they can answer them to your expectations.
Wonderful. Now that you've chosen your broker and life's going along and they're clearing your imports, they say obviously that you can't manage what you can't measure. So how often would you recommend having the communication the meetings in our industry of brokerage, it's very common to say, "Oh, I'm out on a QBR," and people manage their brokers through KPIs. Pete, could you tell us a little more about the QBRs and KPIs? Is that something you see a lot of? Is it something you recommend?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. QBRs are great. QBRs are great. It's a great way to level set, but you need to be having communications and talking with your broker a lot more than that. It should not be unrealistic to expect weekly calls and sometimes even more than that for sticky situations. And if you have something new or something challenging, you should be talking to them long before you ever import it. The farther up the supply chain you could get involved with your broker, the better off your entry is going to be. As far as KPIs go, it can be anything from the timeliness of the entry, the completeness of the entry, and of course, the accuracy of the entry. And ICPA has published a tremendous amount about what it is that you should be focusing on. And really, it can also come down to your product as well. They can be product specific KPIs. In your industry, I'm sure that cold chain is very important. So not only accuracy, but expediency as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Friends,
And I just wanted to add, I feel like a great QBR should be like a great employee annual review, in that nothing in it should be a surprise, because you should have already been talking about this all quarter long, right? So if you come to the QBR and you're like, these metrics are awful, right? These KPIs are awful. There's been a communication breakdown long before that, right? And so then that regular communication should be in place so that when you get to the QBR, you can check those KPIs and say, yep, we're on track, but you already knew that, right? And you can then dig into more interesting things like, what's going on with our business? What new things are we getting into? What questions do we have for our broker about, optimizing our imports, or, dealing with the regulatory changes? The KPI portion should not be a surprise when you show up to that QBR.
thank you. Angela, we hear the last 2 or 3 years in the custom brokerage industry, there's been, the Broker Modernization Act and continuing educational requirements. Could you briefly tell us about these changes going through our industry way before the trade war?
Oh, sure, of course. So this in December of 2022, the broker regulations, and that's at 19 CFR 111 within the federal code. But the regulations were updated by customs to align customs expectation with the trade, and really codified it into law, what they expect. And so for customs brokers, there is now a continuing education requirement that we receive 36 hours of continuing education every 3 years. That doesn't affect the importers as much, but that's something that you can talk to your broker about, is how they're, managing their continuing education requirements. And some brokers may even be, providing courses and things to support the community. But on the importer side, a big impact that we saw from the reg changes was that the importer needs to directly sign the power of attorney, giving authority to their customs broker. And prior to the reg change, a freight forwarder or a third party, could have found a customs broker for you, signed that on your behalf. Now customs requires that you, as the importer, have an officer of your company sign the power of attorney. And that was important to customs because they wanted to make sure you had a direct relationship, that you knew who your broker was. They're taking very serious responsibility on your behalf, and that you know them and you're working with them directly. You know how to contact them if you need to. There were some other things, like servers having to be in the United States, record keeping. The broker needs to be on domestic soil when they're processing your customs entries. But that's probably more than this audience, wants to get into that level of granularity.
Fabulous. Well, friends, we've covered, I think, pretty much the A to Z of how to manage your broker, when to engage a broker. And it's time for some Q&A. So we've got a couple of questions, but please go ahead to the Q&A section and type your answer. And if we can't get to you, we will be certain to respond offline in the next day or two. So
I unfortunately do have an 11 o'clock, so I'll have to jump off in a moment.
Well, Pete, thank you very much. We understand. So Samson asks, what is the liability of the customs broker for a wrong declaration or misrepresentation? In some countries, they risk the broker license suspension or penalty?
Yeah,
Um,
so I'd love to provide some feedback on that. So one thing to know is that the liability of a customs broker is different from one country to another. It is not the same. So in Mexico, for example, the customs broker is the ultimate person liable for the customs entry. In Mexico, it is the customs broker. And so then you'll see a very different relationship between a customs broker in Mexico and the importer client, where the customs broker will make an ultimate decision of what the classification will be or what the country of origin will be, because it's their liability, not the importer. In the US, the primary liability is on the importer. There is some liability for the broker in terms of what they file with customs, but that depends on the nature of where the error came from. And it also depends on what your contract says, what your terms and conditions say. So one of the things that you want to look at as the importer is, do you have a contract or some kind of service agreement, master service agreement with your broker? I guarantee you it has some kind of limitation of liability in there for your customs broker. And oftentimes it's very low. It's a very low limitation of liability on purpose, right? So I would say I've commonly seen like $50 as the limit per shipment per entry as a limitation of liability. And so check that. Look at the terms and conditions that are attached to the power of attorney that you sign for the customs broker. You will have terms and conditions. They will go along with that power of attorney, and they will have a limitation of liability. And so that's another key piece. When you're engaging a new customs broker, you really should have your own legal counsel review those documents and make sure that you understand what you're agreeing to. Overall, the broker has typically, representations and certifications insurance that covers them for professional liability, as all brokers should. And their liability is really going to be more limited to serious errors that they made. And oftentimes they're going to say, I relied on the information that you provided me, right? And that the liability goes back to the importer. So that's my take on it.
Wonderful. Friends, we've got a couple more questions, even though our allotted hour is over. Let's just go through some quick questions. One is, without speculation, Carlos asks, what is the guesstimated tariff we'll end up dealing with China? Well, let's pull out a crystal ball. I think it's going to be 10%, but does anyone want to take a stab at it? Carlos, I think it's still early days, but I will ask the panel.
Well, right now it's effectively 30% because you have the 10%, which is part of the reciprocal tariff, which is on pause until August at the 10%. And there's also a 20% on country of origin China for the fentanyl program. Both of those programs are going through the court system right now in terms of their legality. It's currently at the Court of Appeals, but a lot of people do anticipate that will go to the Supreme Court in 2026. So for now, it's speculation, it's anybody's guess, but it's definitely a topic of great interest right now.
Great answer. For a second, I thought it was inbound China. That's why I said 10%. Great answer.
I just want to add, I think that when the court ruling from the Court of International Trade came out and it struck down the use of IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, use to impose tariffs, I think a lot of people really jumped the gun on this and were like, oh, great, I don't have to pay the tariffs anymore. They're gone now because they're illegal. And that's just not the case. So for one thing, that was nearly immediately put on hold. The order was put on hold. It's got to work its way through the Court of Appeals, and then it's got to go to the Supreme Court, because it will go to the Supreme Court after that. But I think that that's really not the important piece at all, because IEEPA was only one method that the administration could have used to impose the tariffs. So even if it is ruled that IEEPA is not the right avenue to impose the tariffs, there are like 5 other methods that the Trump administration can employ to be able to impose these tariffs. That is the goal, and so then they will find a way to do it. And so what I would advise all importers is, do not sit on your hands thinking that the tariffs are just going to go away at some point. They are not. You need to be working right now on what is the best way to optimize your supply chain, assuming that tariffs are here to stay.
Perfect. I completely agree that tariffs sadly might stay, will stay. A couple of other questions. Christopher asks, for somebody interested in starting their own logistics business, can a customs broker be able to help find new clientele for you? Christopher, sadly, unless you have a personal relationship or a really good professional relationship with a broker, that's really not the business they're in, of helping you find clients. But if you have the personal connection, then absolutely go for it. But don't expect them to do business development for you. We've got a question on three quick questions. Angela, you talked about power of attorney being current with your broker. What if you want to change your broker and switch? Do you need to revoke the old broker's power of attorney, or do you just stop sending business to them?
And this goes to what Lila was saying about the terms and conditions and the language in your power of attorney, because the federal regulations, unless you're a partnership, so for, a corporation with an EIN, there's not a requirement that that POA expire. And so that can be written in. You can add that to your power of attorney, or your broker may give you an expiration to renew your power of attorney. But if that's not there, that power is into infinity, right? And so if you stop working with someone, they're a dormant agent, but they still have that authority to act on your behalf. So if you're sure that you want to end the relationship, you have no intention of doing future business with them, then you can send them a written notification that you're revoking the power of attorney, and that reduces your risk that they could take an action on your behalf. If customs reaches out to them or they get another inquiry, they're not going to respond to that requester. They're going to come to you if they no longer have a power of attorney on file.
Perfect. Another two questions in the Q&A. Lila, let me ask you this question. Do we really need our own internal trade compliance person if we have a fantastic customs broker?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, because you need to be able to manage that customs broker, right? And that the customs broker cannot do all aspects of compliance for you, right? Like we talked a little bit about record keeping, and the responsibility for record keeping is not one that your broker can completely do for you. But the same with things like the classifications of your goods, determining the country of origin of your goods, being able to make sure that you've got all the proper FDA approvals in place, or other partner government agencies that you might run into. Your customs broker can be a great guide and a great resource, but they cannot do everything trade compliance related that your organization needs to do when you're importing and exporting. And so it's really important that you do have your own internal knowledgeable person who's budgeted and resourced to do that. This is not something that you should stick on the shipping person and just say, oh, you're trade compliance now, along with all of your other duties. It needs to be a dedicated resource who's got some knowledge and who's going to be given the budget to be able to get training, to have whatever software solutions you might need, and be able to be competently managing compliance for you.
Thank you. A related question is, what services does a customs broker not provide? I know earlier on we said that there's freight forwarders, there's customs consultants, there's attorneys, each of whom provide a very useful role. But are there any services that you think a broker would, but they don't? Could you address that, Lila?
Yeah, I think it's there's a fine line that is different for different brokers between when you are in the value added services of a broker and when you cross into that's really more consulting work. That's a consulting project, right? So you have an entry and you got an initial classification from your supplier, but it's not complete. Maybe they only gave you the first six digits of a 10-digit classification for the import, right? To ask your broker to help you to get to the 10-digit classification for that entry, that's part of within the normal scope of a broker, right? To say, hey, broker, I have these 10,000 products that I need classified, that's not within the scope of just what a broker's doing for you. That crosses into consulting, right? To say, hey, broker, I need you to, help me respond to this, this focused assessment, report, or, big penalty or thing like that. That's really kind of beyond the scope. That's where you need to get into a trade attorney. So, smaller transactional based questions or just regulatory guidance overall, definitely things I would look to your broker for. But when you're crossing into major projects that are going to take hours and hours of people's time, that's really consulting work. And your broker may or may not have their own consulting services that they provide.
Thank you. I see another two questions come in. One is, I ship using FedEx Express. Should I hire a BSO, broker select option, for my third-party broker? Good question. Especially in regulated industries where you need your goods handheld through customs and it's time sensitive. What are your thoughts, Angela or Lila?
Yeah, I see it working both ways. I've seen arguments made by importers that having everything in one place makes it a smooth experience. The handover is all within their company, within their systems. I've also seen customers who've had frustration with an exam not going well, something being held up, and they just have a relationship with their broker that knows their products really well, like Pete was talking about, with the relationship and just being very available and supportive, where you don't care about any extra headaches and hurdles. You want your other broker to clear your entry. And there is a handover process, and FedEx will hand that over. So if you're currently with FedEx and they're doing everything, if you're happy with the service and you feel like you've got good communication and support, you may not want to break something that's working. But if you've got concerns or curiosity as to whether you could have a more, a better broker experience, then you could talk to others and see if it's worth it to do that handover.
Yeah, so no offense at all to FedEx, UPS, DHL, to your big parcel carriers, especially with the next FedEx guy, right, on the call. They are really great at what they do. And what they do really well is very high volumes of quickly moving packages. And they're great at that. When you have a very complex product that has interactions with partner government agencies, that's not part of their core competency. It's not that they can't do it, but that's not at the core of what they're really good at doing. And so then those are examples where I recommend that you at least consider a more traditional customs broker who can give you a little more hand-holding for shipments like that. So that's just from my experience working in some pretty heavily regulated industries like defense, aerospace, and things like that, where it wasn't really the best fit. But to Angela's point, if you're already using them and you're happy and things are going well, it doesn't mean you need to change.
Brilliant. On that wonderful note that your customs broker really is a very useful tool in your arsenal. Friends, we'll close this webinar, but I assure you we will send all the registrants a copy of the recording and also some sample RFPs that Lila and Devendra have been kind enough to share. Devendra, any final thoughts?
Not really, other than to express our gratitude for the outstanding education that these exceptional licensed custom brokers have given us. And I think our community has benefited a lot. And I call upon the community to rely on all of you for their ongoing challenges that they're going to have. So thank you again for everything you've done today. I've learned a lot.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Lila. Thank you, Angela. Pete had to jump off, but thanks to all the attendees. And we promise you there'll be a lot more educational topics coming from BSMA to you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.